The 27-year-old architect standing in the doorway of the upscale charity gala looked like he could buy the building without checking his bank account. And Wendy Kellerman decided immediately that she did not like him. She watched from behind the registration table as Kyle Crawford made his entrance, flanked by two business associates who laughed too loudly at whatever he had just said. His dark suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, and the confident way he moved through the crowd suggested he knew it. Wendy had volunteered for this event because she believed in the cause, helping fund after-school programs for underprivileged kids in Boston. Men like Kyle Crawford attended because it looked good for their corporate image. "That's Kyle Crawford," her friend Marissa whispered, leaning over the table. "He designed that new waterfront complex downtown, made millions before he turned 25. "Good for him," Wendy muttered, checking off another guest's name. "Don't be bitter just because you're still paying off student loans." Wendy shot her friend a look. "I'm not bitter. I just don't trust people who have everything handed to them." "He actually started his firm from nothing," Marissa said. "My cousin works in architecture. Says Crawford practically lived in his office for 3 years straight to make it work." Before Wendy could respond, the man himself approached their table. Up close, he was annoyingly attractive, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His brown hair was styled perfectly, and when he smiled at them, Wendy noticed it didn't quite reach those observant eyes. "Kyle Crawford," he said, his voice smooth and professional. "I should be on the list." Wendy found his name and checked it off with more force than necessary. "You're at table 7. "Thank you." He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Have we met before?" "No," Wendy said firmly. "You look familiar." "I have one of those faces." She was already looking past him to the next guest in line, dismissing him. Instead of moving on, Kyle leaned against the table slightly. "Are you always this warm with people, or am I special?" Wendy met his gaze directly. "I'm here to check in guests, not make friends with them." "Fair enough." He pushed off from the table, but there was something amused in his expression now, like she had said exactly what he expected. "Enjoy your evening." After he walked away, Marissa elbowed her. "Could you have been more rude?" "Probably," Wendy admitted, "but I wasn't trying." The truth was, men like Kyle Crawford represented everything that frustrated her about the world. While she worked 2 jobs to afford her tiny apartment and make payments on loans from a degree that was supposed to guarantee success, people like him seemed to glide through life. She had grown up in a working-class family where every dollar mattered, where her parents fought about bills, and her mother worked night shifts as a nurse while her father drove trucks cross-country. Wendy had earned everything through sheer determination, and she had little patience for people born with advantages. An hour later, when her volunteer shift ended, Wendy circulated through the gala, nursing a glass of wine and chatting with other volunteers. The ballroom was stunning, with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. She was admiring the view when a voice behind her said, "So you do know how to smile." She turned to find Kyle Crawford standing there with his own drink, his tie loosened slightly. This close, without the registration table between them, she noticed he was taller than she thought, probably 6'2" to her 5'6". "I smile at people I like," she said. "Ouch." But he was grinning now, genuinely amused. "What did I do to get on your bad side so quickly?" "You didn't do anything." "Then why the hostility?" Wendy considered lying, but she had never been good at it. "Because men like you show up to events like this, write a check, feel good about themselves, and then go back to your expensive lives without actually caring about the cause." Kyle was quiet for a moment, processing that. "That's quite an assumption." "Am I wrong?" "Actually, yes." He moved to stand beside her at the window, looking out at the water. I grew up in Dorchester, in a one-bedroom apartment with my mom and two sisters. I shared a mattress on the floor with my older sister until I was 12. My mom worked 3 jobs and still couldn't always make rent. The only reason I'm standing here in this suit is because a free after-school program kept me off the streets and taught me to draw. The woman who ran it saw something in my sketches and helped me apply for scholarships. So no, I don't just write checks and forget about it. Wendy felt heat creep up her neck, embarrassment mixing with surprise. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. No, you shouldn't have. His tone wasn't harsh, just matter of fact. But I get it. I probably look like every other wealthy jerk who shows up to these things. You kind of do, she admitted. That made him laugh, a real sound that transformed his face into something more approachable. At least you're honest. I'm Kyle, by the way, but you already know that. Wendy. What do you do, Wendy, when you're not judging people at charity events? I teach high school English in Roxbury. She waited for the usual reaction, pity or uncomfortable admiration or questions about why she would choose such a difficult job. Instead, Kyle just nodded. That's harder than anything I do. You design buildings. Buildings don't talk back or deal with teenage drama. He paused. My sister teaches elementary school. I have massive respect for educators. They fell into an easy conversation after that, and Wendy found herself reluctantly enjoying his company. He asked intelligent questions about her work and actually listened to the answers. He told funny stories about architectural disasters and demanding clients. When he mentioned a project that had completely fallen apart due to a contractor's mistakes, she found herself laughing at his animated description of the chaos. So the entire structural support was off by 3 feet, he was saying. 3 feet. Do you know what that means for a building? That it falls down. Eventually, yes. We had to scrap the whole thing and start over. I almost had a breakdown in the middle of the construction site. But you fixed it. I fixed it. He looked at her with something like respect. You remind me of someone. Who? My sister, actually. Emma. She's got this bullshit detector that's unmatched, doesn't let me get away with anything. Before Wendy could respond, one of Kyle's associates appeared, apologizing for interrupting but needing to discuss something urgent. Kyle excused himself with what seemed like genuine reluctance, and Wendy found herself watching him walk away, confused by her own mixed feelings. You were talking to Kyle Crawford for 20 minutes, Marissa appeared at her elbow. I thought you hated him. I don't hate him, I just thought I would. And now I think he might be more complicated than I assumed. Wendy finished her wine. But that doesn't change anything. We're from completely different worlds. What Wendy didn't see was Kyle glancing back at her from across the room, or the thoughtful expression on his face as his associate droned on about contracts and deadlines. She also didn't hear the conversation he had an hour later with his best friend and business partner, Marcus Thompson. You're distracted, Marcus observed. They were standing outside the venue waiting for their cars. There was this woman, Kyle started. There's always a woman. Not like this. She completely wrote me off before I even opened my mouth. When I tried to talk to her, she basically accused me of being a shallow, rich guy who doesn't care about anything real. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And that attracted you because she was right to be skeptical. Because she didn't fall all over me when she found out what I do or how much money I make. Because when we actually talked, it was the first real conversation I've had in months. Kyle ran a hand through his hair. I want to see her again, so ask her out. I don't think she'd say yes. She teaches at a high school in Roxbury, works volunteer events on weekends. She's not impressed by money or success. Then impress her with something else. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. You're Kyle Crawford. When you want something, you make it happen. That night, lying in bed in his downtown penthouse, Kyle couldn't stop thinking about Wendy Kellerman. He had dated plenty of women, but most of those relationships followed a predictable pattern. They were attracted to his success, his money, the lifestyle he could provide. Conversations stayed surface level. They looked good on his arm at business dinners, but didn't challenge him or make him laugh the way Wendy had in their brief interaction. He found himself thinking about the way she had stood up to him without apology, the intelligence in her eyes, the passion in her voice when she talked about her students. He wanted to know more. He wanted to prove to her that he wasn't what she assumed. The next morning, Kyle did something impulsive. He called the organization that had hosted the gala and, using his considerable charm and a generous donation, got Wendy's contact information. Then he called Marcus. "I have an idea," Kyle said, "but you're going to think I'm crazy." "I already think you're crazy. What's the idea?" "I'm going to make a bet." 2 days later, Wendy was in the teacher's lounge grading essays during her lunch period when her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Wendy Kellerman?" The voice was familiar, smooth and confident. "Kyle Crawford, you remember me. I'm flattered." "How did you get my number?" "I made a very generous donation to the literacy program." He sounded completely unapologetic about it. "Before you get angry, I was planning to donate more anyway." "I just asked for your contact information as a bonus." Wendy should have hung up. Instead, she found herself saying, "That's borderline stalking. It's persistent. There's a difference." "What do you want?" "To see you again." "Have dinner with me?" "No." "Why not?" Wendy set down her red pen. "Because we have nothing in common. Because you live in a completely different world than I do. Because I don't date men who think money can solve everything." "Fair points," Kyle said, "but I think you're wrong about us having nothing in common. I think we actually have a lot to talk about, and you know it, because we spent 20 minutes talking at the gala and you smiled more than once." "I was being polite." "You were being genuine. There's a difference." He paused. "I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested in propositions." "Hear me out. I think I can prove to you in 30 days that I'm worth your time, that I'm not just some shallow rich guy, that we have a real connection." Wendy laughed, incredulous. "You want to make a bet about whether you can win me over, essentially, yes." "That's insane." "Probably. But I'm willing to put money on it." She could hear the smile in his voice. "If I can't prove to you in 30 days that I'm worth dating, I'll donate $100,000 to your school. New textbooks, technology, whatever you need most." That got her attention. Her school was desperately underfunded. $100,000 could change students' lives. "And if you succeed, you agree to a real relationship. 3 months minimum. Give us an actual shot." "This is the most arrogant thing I've ever heard." "Maybe. Or maybe it's a man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to go after it." His voice softened slightly. "Look, I'm not asking you to sleep with me or fall in love with me in 30 days. I'm just asking you to give me a chance to show you I'm not what you think I am. 30 days of getting to know each other. Real conversations. If at the end of it you still think I'm not worth your time, you get $100,000 for your school and you never have to see me again." Wendy knew she should say no. This whole thing was ridiculous, orchestrated, nothing like the organic relationships she believed in. But she thought about her students studying from textbooks published in the 90s, about the computer lab with machines that barely worked, about the art program that had been cut 3 years ago due to budget constraints. "You're serious about the money?" "Completely. I'll put it in writing." She took a deep breath. "Fine, 30 days, but I'm warning you right now you're not going to win this bet. We'll see about that." She could hear the triumph in his voice and wanted to wipe that smugness away. "Ground rules," she said firmly. "No expensive gifts, no showing off your money. If we're doing this, we do it like normal people. Agreed. And I get to plan half the dates. Even better. I want to see your world too. After they hung up, Wendy sat in the empty teacher's lounge wondering what she had just agreed to. Her friend and fellow teacher, Deanna Morrison, walked in and immediately noticed her expression. What happened? You look shell-shocked. I think I just made a deal with a millionaire to let him try to win me over in 30 days. Deanna sat down across from her. I'm going to need more details. Wendy explained the whole situation, watching Diana's expression cycle through disbelief, amusement, and finally excitement. This is like something out of a movie, Deanna said. A gorgeous, rich architect makes a bet that he can win your heart. He didn't say heart. He said prove he's worth my time. Same thing, Deanna grinned. When do you start? Tomorrow night, apparently. He's picking me up at 7. What are you going to wear, Deanna? I'm not trying to impress him. I'm trying to prove him wrong. Right, of course. But Deanna was still grinning. This is going to be interesting. That night, Wendy went through her closet 3 times before admitting to herself that she did care what she wore, even if only because she wanted to look good while proving Kyle Crawford wrong. She settled on dark jeans and a green sweater that her mother had always said brought out her eyes. Casual but put together. Kyle arrived exactly at 7, and Wendy had to admit he cleaned up well even in jeans and a leather jacket. He was holding a single coffee cup from her favorite local shop. How did you know I like this place? She asked suspiciously. I didn't. I asked around the neighborhood what the best coffee shop was, and 3 people mentioned this one. He handed her the cup. Vanilla latte, right? She had ordered exactly that drink at the gala. You remember my coffee order from one event. I remember a lot of things. He smiled. Ready to go. Where are we going? You said no expensive places, so I thought we'd start simple. There's a pizza place in the North End I've been going to since I was a kid. Best pizza in Boston, but you have to wait in line and the chairs are uncomfortable, and the owner yells at everyone. Wendy found herself smiling despite her determination to remain skeptical. That actually sounds perfect. The pizza place was exactly as described. They waited 45 minutes in line, squished between other customers in a tiny space that smelled like garlic and fresh bread. Tony, the owner, did indeed yell at them to decide faster when they reached the counter. They ended up at a small table in the corner, eating pizza that was genuinely the best Wendy had ever tasted. How did you find this place? She asked between bites. My mom used to bring us here on special occasions when we were kids. Birthdays, good report cards, that kind of thing. It was expensive for us back then, even though it's cheap compared to most restaurants. Kyle folded his pizza slice in half, eating it New York style. I still come here when I need to remember where I came from. You need that reminder often, more than you'd think. It's easy to get caught up in the money and success, and forget that 10 years ago, I was eating ramen for every meal and sleeping in my office because I couldn't afford rent and office space. Wendy studied him across the table. Why architecture? Because buildings matter. They shape how people live, how communities function. I grew up in ugly, cramped spaces that made everything harder. I wanted to create places that made life better, especially for people who don't usually get beautiful spaces. He met her eyes. Why teaching? Because words matter. Literature gives people tools to understand themselves and the world. My students are dealing with poverty, violence, instability at home. Sometimes a book is the only escape they have, the only way they see that life can be different. She paused. Plus, I really love when a student who insisted they hate reading gets excited about a story. What book makes them change their minds? Depends on the kid. I've had tough guys cry over Of Mice and Men, girls who felt invisible connect with the perks of being a wallflower. The key is matching the right story to the right person. They talked for 2 hours, until Tony literally told them he was closing and they had to leave. Walking back to Kyle's car, a sleek but not ostentatious sedan, Wendy realized she had enjoyed herself far more than she intended. "This was actually nice," she admitted as he drove her home. "You sound surprised." "I am surprised. I expected you to try harder to impress me." "I am trying to impress you," Kyle said, "just with who I actually am instead of what I can buy." When he pulled up outside her apartment building, a modest 3-story walk-up in Jamaica Plain, he walked her to the door like an old-fashioned gentleman. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "You want to see me every day for 30 days. That was the deal. We get to know each other." Wendy hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow I'm planning the date, though. I'm looking forward to it." She waited for him to try to kiss her, but he just smiled and walked back to his car. Watching him drive away, Wendy felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the wall she had built. She pushed the feeling away. 29 days left, she reminded herself. This was just a bet. The next evening, Wendy took Kyle to a community theater production in Roxbury. The theater was housed in a converted church. The seats were folding chairs, and the production of A Raisin in the Sun was performed by local actors who had day jobs and rehearsed at night. It was raw and powerful, and nothing like the polished professional shows at the Boston Theater District. Kyle watched the entire performance with complete attention, and when it ended, he applauded as loudly as anyone. "That was incredible," he said as they walked out into the cool spring evening. "The actor playing Walter Lee was phenomenal." "He's a bus driver during the day," Wendy said. "His daughter is in one of my classes. She's the one who told me about the show." "Do you do this often, support your students' families, when I can? It matters to them that someone shows up." Kyle was quiet for a moment. "You're a really good teacher, aren't you?" "I try to be." She glanced at him. "Did you actually like that, or were you just being polite?" "I genuinely loved it. It reminded me why I fell in love with art in the first place, before everything became about money and clients and building codes." He stopped walking, turning to face her under a streetlight. "Thank you for bringing me here. It's only day 2. Don't get too sentimental." But she was smiling, and so was he, and Wendy felt that crack in her wall widen just slightly. The third date, Kyle took her to a Red Sox game, but instead of expensive box seats, they sat in the bleachers, eating hot dogs and drinking beer from plastic cups. The fourth date, Wendy brought him to her favorite bookstore, a tiny used shop in Cambridge where the owner's cat slept on stacks of paperbacks, and everything smelled like old pages and possibility. Kyle spent an hour browsing the architecture section and emerged with 5 books he insisted on buying. By the end of the first week, they had fallen into an easy rhythm. Kyle would pick her up after school some days, and they would walk through different Boston neighborhoods, talking about everything and nothing. Wendy learned that his favorite movie was The Shawshank Redemption, that he couldn't cook to save his life but made excellent coffee, that he still sent money to his mother and sisters every month, even though they insisted he didn't need to. "They worked their whole lives taking care of me," he said when she asked about it. "Now I get to take care of them." Wendy told him about her parents, how her father had died of a heart attack 5 years ago, how her mother had moved to Florida to live with Wendy's older brother, but called every Sunday. She told him about the students who broke her heart, the ones she couldn't save, and the ones who came back years later to tell her she had made a difference. "I had a student 2 years ago, Marcus," she said one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the Charles River. "Brilliant kid, but he was in a gang. I spent a year trying to get him to see he had other options. He dropped out anyway, and I thought I had failed." She smiled. Last month, he showed up at my classroom. He had gotten his GED, enrolled in community college. He just wanted to tell me that something I said stuck with him. What did you say? That his life didn't have to be determined by where he started, that he got to choose his own ending. Kyle reached over and took her hand, a simple gesture that sent warmth through her entire body. You're pretty amazing, Wendy Kellerman. Don't get soft on me, Crawford. We're only a week in. But she didn't pull her hand away, and they sat there watching the boats on the river until the sun set and the city lights began to glow. The second week, things shifted. The easy friendship they had developed started to feel like something more. Kyle found excuses to touch her, his hand on the small of her back as they walked, his shoulder brushing hers in movie theaters. Wendy caught herself thinking about him during her classes, wondering what he was doing, looking forward to seeing him. On the 10th day, he took her to his office. The architecture firm was located in a converted warehouse in the Seaport district, all exposed brick and huge windows. His team was working late on a project, and Wendy was struck by the energy in the space, people collaborating and arguing and creating together. This is impressive, she said, looking at the models and blueprints covering every surface. We're designing a community center for Mattapan, Kyle explained, showing her the detailed plans. It'll have after-school programs, a health clinic, a job training center. The whole thing is funded by a partnership between the city and private donors, including you. I'm covering about 30%, but I wanted to design it more than anything. This is the kind of project I dreamed about when I was starting out. He looked at her. I wanted you to see this, to understand that the work I do matters to me. It's not just about money. Wendy studied the plans, seeing the care that had gone into every detail, the way he had designed spaces that would be welcoming and functional and beautiful. I think I'm starting to understand that. That night, Kyle kissed her for the first time. He walked her to her door, and instead of the usual friendly goodbye, he hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and she appreciated that he asked instead of assuming. "Yes," she whispered. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might pull away. But when she leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, he deepened it, one hand cupping her face while the other settled at her waist. It was the kind of kiss that made the world disappear, that made her forget they were standing on her doorstep in plain view of her neighbors. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly. "I know that wasn't part of the bet, but I needed you to know." Wendy's heart was hammering. "Kyle, this is just 30 days. You said that yourself." "I know what I said, and I know it's only been 10 days. But Wendy, this is real for me. You're not a challenge or a bet or something I'm trying to win. You're someone I can't stop thinking about." She wanted to say she felt the same way, but fear held her back. Letting herself feel this way, trusting someone with this much money and power, went against every self-protective instinct she had developed growing up. Instead, she kissed him again, hoping he could feel what she couldn't yet say. The next morning, Wendy's mother called during her planning period. "You sound different," her mother said immediately. "What's going on?" "Nothing, I'm fine." "Wendy Marie Kellerman, I raised you. I know when something is happening," Wendy sighed. "I met someone." Her mother's delighted squeal nearly deafened her. "Tell me everything." "His name is Kyle. He's an architect. He's successful and smart and kind, and I think I'm falling for him, and it terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because he has money, Mom. Real money, millions. And you know how I feel about that. You know what I've seen money do to people." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Honey, your father and I fought about money because we didn't have enough of it. The fights weren't because money is evil. They were because poverty is stressful and scary." If this man is good to you, if he treats you with respect and makes you happy, who cares how much money he has? But we're from different worlds. So what? Your father was from South Boston. I grew up on a farm in Vermont. Different worlds can come together if the people care enough. Her mother's voice softened. Don't punish this man for being successful, especially if he earned it honestly. Give yourself permission to be happy. After they hung up, Wendy sat at her desk thinking about that conversation. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe she had been so focused on not being impressed by money that she had missed the actual person underneath. Kyle had spent 2 weeks showing her exactly who he was, not trying to buy her affection, but earning it through his actions, his attention, his genuine interest in her life. That evening she texted him, "Want to meet my friends?" His response was immediate, "Absolutely." When? Saturday night, Wendy hosted a game night at her apartment. Diana and her husband came, along with 3 other teachers from school and Marissa from the charity gala. Kyle showed up with wine and a board game nobody had heard of, but that turned out to be hilarious. He fit in seamlessly, making everyone laugh, asking questions about their lives, genuinely connecting with people. Wendy watched him explain the rules of the game to Deanna's husband, saw him debate teaching strategies with her colleague Robert, noticed how he helped clean up without being asked. This wasn't the wealthy architect at a charity gala. This was just Kyle, comfortable in her modest apartment with her regular friends, being himself. "I like him," Deanna whispered in the kitchen while they were getting snacks. "He's not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone more arrogant, more flashy. He's actually really down to earth." Deanna bumped Wendy's shoulder. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" "Big trouble," Wendy admitted. After everyone left, Kyle helped her finish cleaning up. They moved around the kitchen in comfortable silence, and Wendy felt something settle in her chest, a rightness she had never experienced before. "Your friends are great," Kyle said, drying the last glass. "They liked you too." "Yeah," he looked pleased. "Don't let it go to your head." But she was smiling. He caught her around the waist, pulling her close. "Too late. I'm already insufferable." She laughed and kissed him, and they ended up on her couch, wrapped around each other, kissing until they were both flushed and breathless. When his hands started to wander under her shirt, she caught them. "Not yet," she said. "I know, I'm sorry." He pulled back, his breathing uneven. "I want you so much it's making me crazy, but we go at your pace." The fact that he respected her boundaries without question made her want him even more. "The bet ends in 2 weeks." "Forget the bet," Kyle said seriously. "This isn't about winning anymore. This is about us." 2 days later, Kyle invited Wendy to dinner at his penthouse. She had been curious about where he lived, but also nervous about seeing the full extent of his wealth. The building was in the Seaport district, all glass and modern design, with a doorman who greeted Kyle by name. His apartment was on the top floor, and it was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. The kitchen had commercial-grade appliances. The living room was filled with carefully chosen furniture that managed to be both stylish and comfortable. But what caught Wendy's attention were the details that revealed who Kyle actually was. The walls were covered with framed sketches, everything from childhood drawings that were clearly his early architectural attempts to sophisticated blueprints. A bookshelf held architectural books mixed with novels and biographies. The refrigerator had photos held by magnets. Kyle with 2 women who must be his sisters. Kyle with an older woman who had to be his mother. Kyle and Marcus at what looked like their firm's opening. "It's not what I expected," Wendy said, walking around. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something more sterile. This feels like an actual home." "That's because it is." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I didn't have a real home growing up." We moved 6 times before I turned 15, always one step ahead of eviction. When I finally made enough money to buy this place, I wanted it to feel permanent, safe. She turned in his arms. Thank you for showing me this. I want to show you everything. He kissed her softly. Now come on, I promised you dinner. Kyle actually cooked, or tried to. He had told her he was terrible at it, but he put genuine effort into making pasta carbonara, following a recipe from his phone with intense concentration. It ended up slightly overcooked and underseasoned, but Wendy ate every bite, charmed by his determination. This is awful, Kyle said, laughing. I should have just ordered takeout. It's not awful, it's endearing. That's what people say when something is awful. After dinner, they sat on his balcony, wrapped in a blanket against the cool April evening, watching the lights of boats moving across the dark water. Wendy felt completely at peace, which was both wonderful and terrifying. Can I tell you something? She said quietly. Anything. I judged you before I knew you. That first night at the gala, I decided you were just another rich guy who didn't care about real things, and I was completely wrong. She turned to look at him. You're one of the best people I've ever met, Kyle. You're kind and genuine, and you care so deeply about everything you do. I'm sorry I didn't see that right away. Kyle cupped her face in his hands. You see it now. That's what matters. I don't want this to end in 2 weeks. I don't care about the bet or the conditions. I just want to be with you. Thank God, he breathed, and then he was kissing her, and this time when his hands wandered, she didn't stop them. They moved inside to his bedroom, and everything felt right in a way Wendy had never experienced. Kyle was patient and attentive, making sure she was comfortable, checking in with her. When they finally came together, it felt like more than just physical connection. It felt like a promise. Afterward, lying in his arms, Wendy felt tears prick her eyes. Kyle noticed immediately. Are you okay? Did I hurt you? No, I'm just happy. She laughed at how ridiculous that sounded. I didn't expect to fall in love with you. Kyle went very still. Say that again. I love you. And saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff and finding out she could fly. I love you, Kyle Crawford. I love you too. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I've loved you since you told me off at the registration table. I just had to wait for you to catch up. They spent the rest of the night talking and making love and planning a future that suddenly seemed possible. When Wendy finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt happier than she could remember being in years. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Kyle met Wendy's mother when she came to visit from Florida, and won her over within 5 minutes by complimenting her cooking and asking genuine questions about her nursing career. Wendy met Kyle's mother and sisters at a family dinner in Dorchester, and his mother pulled her aside to say, I've never seen my boy this happy. They spent evenings at her apartment and weekends at his, slowly merging their lives. Kyle came to her classroom one day to talk to her students about architecture as a career, and watching him crouch down to look at a student's sketches with complete attention, Wendy fell even more in love. On day 28, they were walking through Boston Common when Kyle suddenly stopped. I have a confession, he said. Wendy's heart skipped. What? I'm an idiot, I know that. What else? He laughed nervously. I made this bet because I was arrogant enough to think I could win you over in 30 days, but the truth is, you won me over in about 30 seconds. Every day since then has just been me falling deeper. Kyle, where is this going? What I'm saying is, I don't care about the bet. I'm not keeping score. Whether it's day 30 or day 300, I just want to be with you. He pulled her close. You already agreed to give us a real shot. Let's just do that. No more timeline, no more conditions, just us. What about the $100,000? I'm donating it anyway. In fact, I talked to your principal last week. The money will fund new textbooks, computers, and bring back the art program. He smiled at her shocked expression. You don't get to be with me for my money, and your students don't lose out because you fell in love with me first. I did not fall first. You absolutely did. I just hit it better. He was grinning now, that confident smile she had once found arrogant and now found irresistible. You're impossible. You love it. I love you, she corrected, and kissed him right there in the middle of the park, not caring who saw. 3 months later, Wendy moved into Kyle's penthouse. 6 months after that, he proposed on the balcony where they had first said they loved each other. The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, a single diamond that caught the light from the harbor. I know we haven't been together that long, Kyle said, down on one knee, but I've never been more sure of anything. You're my partner, my best friend, the person who makes me want to be better every single day. Will you marry me? Yes, Wendy said through happy tears. Yes, absolutely yes. They got married the following spring in a small ceremony at the same venue where they had met. The guest list was a perfect mix of their two worlds. Kyle's business associates and architecture colleagues mixed with Wendy's teacher friends and former students. His family from Dorchester sat with her family from Vermont and Florida. Tony from the pizza place catered the rehearsal dinner. During the reception, Marcus stood to give a toast. I've known Kyle for 10 years, he said. I've seen him build an empire from nothing, design buildings that changed neighborhoods, succeed beyond any of our wildest dreams. But I've never seen him as happy as he's been this past year. He raised his glass. Wendy, thank you for seeing past the money and the success to the guy who still eats terrible pizza and can't cook to save his life. You're perfect for him. Wendy's mother gave her own toast, eyes shining with tears. My daughter has always been stubborn and independent and determined to make her own way in the world. Kyle, thank you for loving her exactly as she is, for supporting her dreams, for being her partner in every way. That night, slow dancing with her husband, Wendy thought about how wrong they had both been. Kyle thought he could win her heart in 30 days through charm and persistence. She thought she could resist him, could prove he was just another wealthy man looking for a trophy. They were both wrong because love doesn't work on timelines or conditions. It happens when two people are brave enough to see each other as they truly are and choose each other anyway. 2 years later, they were still living in the penthouse, though they had talked about buying a house when they started a family. Wendy was still teaching, and Kyle still designed buildings, but they had found ways to merge their passions. Together, they had started a foundation that funded arts and architecture programs in underfunded schools across Boston. One evening, Wendy came home to find Kyle on the balcony, sketching in the fading light. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, looking at the drawing taking shape on the page. "What is it?" she asked. "A house. Our house, maybe. 3 bedrooms, big yard, in a neighborhood where we can walk to parks and schools." He glanced back at her. "Too soon to be thinking about that." Wendy kissed his cheek. "Actually, I've been thinking about it too." "Yeah." He set down the sketch and turned to face her fully. "I'm pregnant." Kyle's face went through about 5 emotions in as many seconds: shock, disbelief, joy, terror, and finally pure happiness. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I took 3 tests this morning. I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm, but yeah, we're having a baby." Kyle picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, his eyes were wet. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," she confirmed. That night, they lay in bed, Kyle's hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, talking about names and nursery colors and how their lives were about to change. "I'm scared," Wendy admitted. "What if I'm not a good mother? Are you kidding? You're amazing with your students. You're going to be an incredible mother." "That's different. I get to send students home at the end of the day." "True. He kissed her temple. "But we're in this together. We'll figure it out." "We always do," she agreed. 9 months later, their daughter was born. They named her Emma Rose Crawford, after Kyle's sister and Wendy's grandmother. She had Kyle's dark hair and Wendy's green eyes, and from the moment Wendy held her, she understood a love that was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. Kyle was an amazing father, patient and hands-on in ways that surprised both of them. He took paternity leave and spent weeks learning to change diapers and prepare bottles, and soothe a crying baby at 3 in the morning. Wendy watched him walk the floors with Emma, singing off-key lullabies, and fell in love with him all over again. When Emma was 6 months old, they bought the house Kyle had sketched that evening on the balcony. It was in Jamaica Plain, close to Wendy's school and the neighborhoods they both loved. It had a yard for Emma to play in and a home office where Kyle could work on designs while still being present for his family. Moving day was chaotic. Marcus and his wife came to help, along with Deanna and her family and Kyle's sisters. They ordered pizza from Tony's, and everyone sat around the empty living room eating and laughing and telling stories. "Remember when we first met?" Wendy said to Kyle later, after everyone had left and they were sitting on their new porch, Emma asleep in her arms. "You mean when you completely wrote me off as a rich jerk?" "I prefer to think of it as maintaining healthy skepticism," Kyle laughed. "You were so hostile, and I loved it, because you're weird. Because you were real." He leaned over to kiss her. "Best bet I ever made." "You lost that bet, remember? I fell in love with you before the 30 days were up. We both lost, or maybe we both won. I can never remember which." Wendy looked at their daughter, then at the house they had chosen together, then at her husband, and felt overwhelming gratitude for that night at the charity gala, for Kyle's persistence, for her willingness to give him a chance despite her reservations. "Definitely won," she said. "We definitely both won." 5 years later, they had 2 children. Emma had a little brother named Henry, who inherited his father's stubborn determination and his mother's love of stories. Wendy had taken a position as vice principal at her school, making changes to curriculum and policy that helped more students succeed. Kyle had opened a second office and was working on affordable housing projects across Massachusetts. Their house was always full of noise and love and chaos. Emma drew elaborate pictures of buildings she wanted her father to design. Henry made everyone listen to long, rambling stories he invented. Kyle still couldn't cook, but he had mastered making pancakes on Saturday mornings. Wendy read to the kids every night before bed, passing on her love of literature to the next generation. Sometimes, when life got overwhelming, Wendy would think back to that first night, standing behind the registration table and deciding she didn't like Kyle Crawford. She would think about how close she had come to letting her prejudices and fears keep her from the greatest love of her life. She would think about Kyle's ridiculous bet and her own stubborn pride, and how wrong they had both been about everything that mattered. The truth was, Kyle hadn't won her heart in 30 days, and she hadn't successfully resisted falling for him. Instead, they had found each other, imperfect and complicated and from completely different worlds, and chosen to build something beautiful together. On their 10-year anniversary, Kyle took Wendy back to the venue where they had first met. The organization was hosting another gala, and this time they attended as major donors and board members. They stood in almost the exact spot where Wendy had checked him in a decade ago, and Kyle pulled her close. "Do I still look like an arrogant rich guy?" he asked, grinning. "Absolutely. But now I know you're my arrogant rich guy." "I was always your arrogant rich guy." "You just took a while to admit it." She kissed him, ignoring the other guests streaming past. "Best 30 days of my life. Mine too." He rested his forehead against hers. "Think we should make another bet." "What kind of bet?" "That we'll still be this happy in another 10 years. "That's not a bet," Wendy said. "That's a guarantee," and she was right. Years later, when their children were grown and starting their own lives, when Kyle's hair had gone gray at the temples and Wendy's laugh lines had deepened, they were still together on that same balcony, watching the harbor lights and holding hands like newlyweds. The bet had ended years ago, but the love story continued, unfolding in ordinary moments and extraordinary ones, in the life they had built together against all odds and expectations. Kyle had thought he could win her heart in 30 days. Wendy had thought she could resist him. They were both wrong, and that made all the difference. Their love wasn't something that could be won or lost, measured or timed. It was something they had created together, day by day, choice by choice, from that first reluctant conversation to a lifetime of partnership. It was in the way Kyle still brought her coffee without being asked, the way Wendy still called him out when he got too full of himself, the way they could communicate with just a look across a crowded room. It was in the foundation they had built that now helped thousands of students across the state. It was in Emma's decision to study architecture like her father and Henry's choice to become a teacher like his mother. It was in the family dinners where everyone talked over each other, and the quiet evenings on the porch and every moment in between. Sometimes love is a thunderbolt, instant and undeniable. Sometimes it's a slow burn, building gradually over time. And sometimes it's a bet that neither person wins because they both end up with something far better than they could have imagined. A true partner, a real love, a life that proves that being wrong can be the best thing that ever happens to you. Wendy and Kyle Crawford were wrong about a lot of things, but they were absolutely right about each other. And that was enough to build a lifetime on.